The biting morning air of February 1150 pierced my wool and fur garments even before I stepped out of the hut. My breath condensed into white, ephemeral clouds, a constant reminder of the icy presence that dominated Scandinavia. My name is Bjorn, and this is my story. The story of a man who lived and breathed a relentless rhythm of nature in a land where winter seemed an eternity, and survival was an art forged in resilience. I remember when I was a child, sitting on my grandmother's lap, near the crackling fire, as she told sagas of gods and heroes. She spoke of Thor and his hammer, of Odin and his wisdom, and of Freya, the goddess of love and fertility. But above all, she spoke of the land, of how it gave us everything and took everything from us, and how we should respect it. These stories were more than entertainment. They were life lessons, guides for existence in a world where the line between the mystical and the mundane was thin. My grandmother, Gudrun, was a central figure in our small community. Her eyes, though wrinkled by time, shone with ancestral wisdom, and her hands, calloused by work, were gentle to the touch. She was the völva of our village, a woman who possessed the gift of seeing beyond the veil, of interpreting dreams, and of healing with herbs and chants. Her presence was a comfort and, at the same time, a constant reminder of the depth of the spiritual world that surrounded us. Our hut, like most rustic homes of the time, was a simple but sturdy structure, built with pine and spruce logs, with gaps caulked with moss and clay. The roof was made of turf, a thick layer of earth and grass that provided insulation against cold and heat. Inside, the smell of wood smoke, smoked meat, and sweat was a familiar fragrance, the aroma of life. There were no glass windows, only small openings covered with animal membranes or removable planks, which kept the heat in, and the light. Well, the light was a luxury that came mainly from the central hearth. The floor was packed earth, covered with fresh straw that was changed regularly to maintain hygiene and comfort. The beds were raised wooden platforms, covered with sheepskins and wool blankets, offering a refuge from the cold that rose from the ground. The hearth was the heart of the house, the source of heat, light, and the place where food was prepared. Around it, the family gathered on long winter nights. My father, Eric, a man of few words but unyielding strength, would sharpen his tools or mend fishing nets. His muscles, developed by years of hard labor in the forest and at sea, were a testament to his resilience. He taught me the value of silence and observation, the art of reading nature's signs, and the importance of a job well done. My mother, Ingrid, would weave or spin wool, her nimble hands transforming raw fibers into threads that would become warm clothes. She was the soul of the house, her soft voice calming the children and her songs filling the silence of the nights. My younger siblings, Ragnar and Freya, played quietly with wooden figures or listened to the stories that I, as the eldest, told to pass the time. Ragnar, with his inexhaustible energy, dreamed of being a great warrior, while Freya, with her curious eyes, absorbed every word of my grandmother's sagas. Life was cyclical, dictated by the seasons. Winter was a period of introspection and indoor work. Snow covered the landscape for months on end, transforming the world into a white and silent blanket. Travel was dangerous and rare. Most of the time was dedicated to maintenance, repairing tools, making clothes, and preparing for spring. Food was scarce, and we relied heavily on what we had stored during the autumn: smoked meat, dried fish, grains, and preserved vegetables. Each day, the worry about provisions hung over us, a constant reminder of the fragility of our existence. I remember once, when I was about 10 years old, hunger bit harder than usual. The winter had been particularly harsh, and provisions were running low. My father, with a grave expression I rarely saw, decided we would have to hunt a moose, a dangerous and uncertain task. He took me with him, teaching me to read tracks in the snow, to feel the wind, to listen to the sounds of the forest. We spent days in the icy woods, the cold penetrating to our bones. Each night we returned to the hut empty-handed, hope dwindling. My mother tried to cheer us up, making a thin broth with the last roots and herbs. Finally, on the third day, we found a moose. The hunt was brutal, a fight for life, but we succeeded. The return to the hut with fresh meat was a triumph, a relief that spread throughout the family. That experience taught me the value of perseverance and the harsh reality of survival. The moose meat was carefully processed. Some was eaten fresh, some smoked to last longer, and the hides were tanned to make clothes and blankets. Nothing was wasted. Religion, for us, was an intrinsic part of life. Although Christianity was slowly spreading through Scandinavia, many of us still held to the old beliefs, or at least a mixture of them. We honored the Norse gods, made offerings to the spirits of the forest and water, and believed that nature was inhabited by invisible beings who could help or harm us. We believed in omens, in dreams that revealed the future, and in rituals that connected us to the spiritual world. My grandmother was a völva, a wise woman who could see the future and heal illnesses with herbs and chants. She was respected and feared, and her words were taken seriously. I remember seeing her in a trance, her eyes fixed on some distant point as she murmured words in an ancient tongue, seeking guidance from the gods. The community was small but united. Our huts were scattered across a clearing near a fjord, and there were about 30 of us, all connected by blood or marriage. Mutual aid was essential. When someone fell ill, everyone helped. When a house needed to be built or repaired, everyone contributed their labor. Festivities, such as Yule winter solstice and midsummer summer solstice, were times of celebration and unity, where food and drink were abundant, and stories and songs were shared. On these occasions, the tensions of daily life were forgotten, and joy filled the air. Yule was particularly important. It was a time to celebrate the return of light, to honor ancestors, and to make plans for the coming year. Huts were decorated with holly and mistletoe branches, and a large Yule log was burned in the hearth, symbolizing hope and renewal. We ate pork, rye bread, and drank mead. Children ran and played, and adults exchanged gifts and told stories. It was a reminder that, even in the harshest winters, life continued and hope never died. Gifts were usually practical: a new knife, a pair of wool gloves, an extra piece of smoked meat. But the true gift was companionship and the certainty that we were not alone. Education was practical. There were no formal schools, but we learned through observation and participation. From an early age, children were taught the skills necessary for survival. Boys learned to hunt, fish, build, and work with wood. Girls learned to cook, weave, cared for the home and children, and gather medicinal herbs. I learned to navigate with my father, to read the stars and currents, to smell a storm before it arrived. I learned to wield an axe and a spear, to build a trap, and to track an animal. Every task was a lesson, every mistake, an opportunity to learn. The forest was our classroom, the fjord, our master. Fishing was a vital part of our subsistence. The fjord provided us with salmon, cod, and herring in abundance. My father and I spent hours in the boat, casting nets or fishing with line and hook. The sea was generous, but also unforgiving. I remember a sudden storm that caught us off guard. The waves were mountains of water, and the boat seemed like a toy in the hands of a giant. My father, with his usual calm, fought against the elements, and I, a frightened boy, rowed with all my might. We managed to return to shore, exhausted but grateful to be alive. That experience taught me respect for the sea and the importance of always being prepared. On every trip, my father taught me the secrets of the sea, where to find the best shoals, how to predict the weather by observing the clouds and the behavior of birds, and how to mend a torn sail in the middle of a storm. Agriculture was limited due to the climate and rocky soil. We cultivated barley, rye, and some hardy vegetables, such as turnips and cabbage, in small plots of land. The work was arduous, and the harvest uncertain. We relied heavily on hunting, fishing, and gathering to supplement our diet. The forests provided us with wild berries, mushrooms, and honey. Women and children spent hours gathering these resources, which were essential for our survival. I remember picking blueberries and blackberries with my mother and Freya. Our fingers stained purple, the basket heavy with the sweetness of the forest. It was tiring work, but rewarding, and the feeling of contributing to the family's subsistence was immense. Health was a constant concern. There were no doctors as we know them today. Illnesses were treated with home remedies, medicinal herbs, and rituals. Wounds were cleaned and bandaged, and fractures were immobilized with wooden splints. Infant mortality was high, and life expectancy was low. I remember the sadness that hung over the community when a child died, or when an adult succumbed to an illness. Life was fragile, and death, a constant companion. My grandmother, with her knowledge of herbs, was our main healer. She knew which plants could relieve fever, which could stop bleeding, and which could soothe pain. Her wisdom was an invaluable treasure. Despite the difficulties, there were moments of joy and beauty. Summer nights, with the midnight sun painting the sky with shades of pink and orange, were magical. The aurora borealis, dancing in the winter night sky, was a breathtaking spectacle, a reminder of nature's grandeur. The stories told around the fire, the songs sung during work, the laughter of children playing in the snow, all of this was part of the tapestry of our lives. These moments of beauty and joy were the pillars that sustained us in difficult times, reminding us of the magic that still existed in the world. The arrival of spring was always a relief. The thaw brought with it the sound of running water, the smell of damp earth, and the promise of new life. Animals emerged from their dens, birds returned, and the first flowers bloomed in the melting snow. It was a time of renewal, hope, and hard work. Fields were prepared for planting, boats were repaired, and nets were mended. Life began anew, and we, like nature itself, adapted and moved forward. The energy of spring was contagious, and everyone worked with renewed vigor, knowing that every effort now would ensure survival through the next winter. If you're enjoying this immersion in medieval Scandinavia, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like for more exciting stories like this. Society was hierarchical, though in a more fluid way than in other parts of Europe. There were jarls, the local chiefs, who held power and wealth, and karls, the freemen, like my family, who owned their own land and had a voice in the local assemblies. There were also thralls, the slaves, who were usually prisoners of war or people who had fallen into debt. Social mobility was possible, and a karl could, with luck and skill, rise to the position of jarl. Our jarl, a man named Harold, was fair but demanding. He expected loyalty and contributions to the defense of the community, but in return, he offered protection and leadership. Justice was administered at the Thing, where free men gathered to resolve disputes, make laws, and judge crimes. Decisions were made by consensus, and honor was a fundamental value. Disputes were often resolved through financial compensation, but in more serious cases, blood vengeance was a reality. I remember a thing where my father had to defend a neighbor accused of theft. The tension was palpable, and words were sharp as knives. In the end, truth prevailed, and the neighbor was acquitted, but the experience showed me the importance of justice and community. Eloquence and the ability to argue were highly valued skills in these gatherings, and my father, though quiet in daily life, possessed a firm and convincing voice when the situation demanded it. Trade was limited, but it existed. We exchanged furs, dried fish, and wood for salt, iron, and other goods we could not produce. Merchants traveled by land and sea, facing the dangers of roads and seas. I remember a merchant who visited our community once a year, bringing news from the outside world and exotic products. He was always received with enthusiasm, and his stories were eagerly listened to. He brought salt, essential for food preservation, and iron tools, which were much more durable than our stone or bone ones. In return, he took our animal furs and dried fish, which were valuable in other lands. War was a part of life, though not as constant as one might imagine. Viking raids had decreased in frequency and intensity, but conflicts between clans and kingdoms still occurred. Men were trained to fight from a young age, and weapons were an essential part of their lives. My father taught me to use an axe and a shield, to fight with honor, and to protect my family and my community. The defense of the village was a shared responsibility, and all able-bodied men participated in regular training, practicing with wooden swords and leather shields. Shipbuilding was an art we mastered. Our boats, the nares and langskips, were engineering marvels, capable of sailing stormy seas and transporting men and goods over long distances. I remember seeing my father and other men from the community building a new boat, their skilled hands shaping the wood with precision and care. It was arduous but rewarding work, and the launching of a new boat was always a celebratory event. The smell of tar and fresh wood filled the air, and with each hammer blow, the boat took shape. A promise of voyages and adventures. Art and culture were expressed through sagas, poems, songs, and craftsmanship. Sagas were epic tales of gods, heroes, and kings, passed down orally from generation to generation. Poems were rich in metaphors and allusions, and songs were sung during work and festivities. Craftsmanship was a form of functional art, with everyday objects decorated with intricate carvings and patterns. My mother was a skilled weaver, and her textiles were known for their beauty and durability. She taught me to appreciate beauty in detail, the patience required to create something lasting, and the importance of infusing a bit of oneself into each piece. Food was simple but nutritious. Our diet consisted mainly of meat, fish, grains, and vegetables. We ate rye bread, oatmeal, porridge, smoked meat, dried fish, cheese, and butter. We drank milk, water, and mead. Food was prepared in the hearth, in iron or ceramic pots. I remember the delicious smell of bread baking in the stone oven, or the meat and vegetable stew slowly cooking over the fire. Each meal was a moment of togetherness, of gratitude for the food that the land and sea offered us. Hygiene was rudimentary. We bathed in rivers and lakes, or in improvised steam baths. Clothes were washed in rivers and dried in the sun. House cleaning was done with branch brooms and water. Despite the lack of modern conveniences, we strived to maintain cleanliness and order in our lives. Each week, the hut was swept and the straw on the floor was changed. And in warmer months, river baths were a refreshing and social ritual. Death was seen as a transition to another world. We believed in Valhalla, the hall of fallen warriors, and in Helheim, the realm of the dead. Funeral rituals were important, and the dead were buried with their belongings, so they could use them in the afterlife. I remember my grandmother's funeral, a solemn and sad event, but also a celebration of her life and wisdom. Her body was wrapped in linen and placed in a burial boat, along with some of her tools and jewelry. Before being buried in a mound, a dignified resting place for a woman of her stature, the passage of time was marked by the seasons, the cycles of the moon, and important life events. We had no clocks, but we knew the time of day by the position of the sun and the time of night by the position of the stars. Life was lived in harmony with nature, and each day was an opportunity to learn, work, and survive. With each new moon, my grandmother taught us about the cycles of nature and the influence of the gods upon them. Despite all the difficulties and challenges, there was a deep sense of community and belonging. We were a resilient people, accustomed to facing adversity and finding joy in small things. The beauty of the landscape, the strength of family, the wisdom of ancestors, all of this gave us strength and purpose. Today, looking back at those times, I realize how simple and complex our lives were. Simple in their direct dependence on nature, complex in the nuances of human relationships and the constant struggle for survival. The endless winter was not just a season, it was a state of mind, a challenge that shaped and strengthened us. Rustic homes were not just shelters, they were sanctuaries, the heart of our existence, where the warmth of the fire and the love of family protected us from the outside world. My life in medieval Scandinavia was a journey of learning, overcoming, and deep connection with the land and my people. The lessons I learned, the experiences I lived, shaped who I am. And, although the world has changed drastically since then, the essence of human resilience, the importance of community, and respect for nature remains. The most vivid memory I hold is of a particularly cold winter night. Snow fell incessantly, and the wind howled like a hungry wolf. We were all gathered around the hearth, the fire casting dancing shadows on the wooden walls. My mother sang an old song, a melancholic melody that spoke of love and loss, but also of hope. My father, his face marked by time and labor, held my hand, and I could feel the strength and security of his touch. My siblings slept peacefully, nestled into each other. In that moment, despite the cold outside, despite the uncertainties of the future, I felt a profound peace. I felt that I was exactly where I should be, surrounded by the people I loved, in a home that, though rustic, was my refuge, my world. Life was hard, yes, but it was real. There were no distractions, no unnecessary luxuries. Each day, we faced the challenges that nature imposed on us, and each night, we found solace in each other's company. We learned to value every ray of sunshine, every successful harvest, every moment of peace. We learned to live with what we had, to be grateful for small blessings, and never to give up. And so, life continued, an endless cycle of harsh winters and short summers, of hard work and moments of joy, of losses and new beginnings. We were the children of Scandinavia, shaped by ice and fire, by land and sea, and our story is a testament to the indomitable strength of the human spirit. The arrival of a new family member was always an event of great anticipation and joy, but also of apprehension. I remember Freya's birth. My mother, with the help of other women from the village, gave birth in our hut, while my father and I waited anxiously outside, under the pale moonlight. The baby's cry was a sound of relief and celebration. Life was a precious gift, and every child born was a new hope for the future of our lineage and our community. Names were chosen carefully, often in honor of ancestors or gods, in the hope that the child would inherit their qualities. Marriage was a pillar of society, a practical and social arrangement that united families and strengthened community ties. My own marriage to Thora, a young woman from a neighboring village, was an event that marked my transition to adulthood. It was not a marriage of romantic love, as told in the sagas, but of mutual respect and a partnership necessary for survival. Thora was strong, intelligent, and hardworking, and together we built our own hut and started our family. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, with vows made before the gods and the community, sealing our union. Raising children was a shared responsibility. From an early age, they were taught to respect elders, to work hard, and to value the community. Children were seen as little adults in training, and discipline was firm but fair. I remember teaching my eldest son, Leaf, to fish, just as my father taught me. Patience and persistence were the first lessons he learned. Sitting beside me in the boat, observing the waters. The relationship with animals was fundamental. We had some goats and sheep, which provided us with milk, wool, and occasionally, meat. Dogs were loyal companions and helpers in hunting and guarding. Horses, though rarer in our mountainous region, were used for long-distance transport. Each animal had its role in the family economy, and they were treated with respect, as their survival was intrinsically linked to ours. I remember once when one of our goats fell gravely ill. My mother and grandmother spent days caring for her, using herbs and prayers. And when she finally recovered, it was as if a family member had returned from the brink of death. Tools and technologies were simple but effective. Iron axes, knives, spears, bows, and arrows were essential for hunting and defense. Women used spindles and looms to make clothes. Iron and ceramic pots were used for cooking. Each tool was made with care and maintained with zeal, for a broken tool could mean the difference between life and death. My father was a master at sharpening blades, and the sound of metal against the whetstone was a constant soundtrack in our home. Communication was primarily oral. News traveled slowly, by word of mouth, from village to village. Sagas and poems were transmitted orally, and memory was a highly valued skill. There was no widespread writing, although runes were used for inscriptions on stones and objects, often for magical or commemorative purposes. I remember my grandmother teaching me some of the meanings of the runes, explaining that they were more than letters. They were symbols of power and wisdom. Travel was dangerous and time-consuming. Roads were rudimentary trails, and the dangers of the forest, wolves, bears, and bandits were real. Sea voyages were faster, but subject to bad weather and the dangers of pirates. However, the need for trade and the search for new lands prompted some to venture out. I myself, in my youth, made a few trips with my father to other villages, exchanging our products for others we did not have. These trips were exciting, but they also made me appreciate the safety and warmth of my own home even more. The landscape was an intrinsic part of our identity. The imposing mountains, deep fjords, dense forests, and rushing rivers shaped our worldview. We believed that every element of nature had a spirit, and that we should respect them to ensure our survival. Trolls lived in the mountains, nixes in the rivers, and elves in the forests. I remember my grandmother warning me not to disturb the forest spirits when I went hunting, always leaving a small offering of food or a thread of wool on a stone. Music and dance were forms of expression and celebration. At festivities, drums beat, bone flutes sounded, and people danced in circles, celebrating life and community. Songs told stories of love, war, gods, and heroes, and were a way to keep our history and culture alive. I remember learning to play a small bone flute, and how music could unite people and lift spirits, even in the darkest times. Honor and reputation were supreme values. A man without honor was a man without worth. Words were taken seriously, and an oath was an unbreakable commitment. A family's reputation was built over generations, and it was the duty of each member to maintain and defend it. My father always taught me to be honest, to keep my word, and to defend my family and my community with courage. Life in medieval Scandinavia was a delicate balance between the struggle for survival and the celebration of life. We were a people of contrasts, warriors and farmers, navigators and storytellers, realists and dreamers. We lived in a world where nature was both a generous mother and an unforgiving force, and where the line between the sacred and the profane was thin. If you've made it this far, it's because this story has touched your heart. Please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our next narratives, and leave your like to help us continue sharing these unforgettable journeys. The future was uncertain. As always, changes were in the air. Kingdoms were consolidating, Christianity was gaining ground, and the outside world was drawing closer. But for us, in our small, isolated village, life continued to be dictated by the ancient rhythms. Winters would continue to be long and harsh, summers short and precious. The land would continue to sustain us, and the sea to challenge us. And I, Bjorn, a simple man from a rustic land, would continue to live my life with the same resilience and gratitude that my ancestors taught me. I would continue to tell my grandmother's stories to my own grandchildren, so they would never forget where we came from and what made us who we are. The history of medieval Scandinavia is not just a story of kings and battles, but also the story of ordinary people, like me, who lived their lives with courage, dignity, and a deep connection to the land and the human spirit. With each dawn, I would step out of the hut, feeling the biting cold on my face, but also the promise of a new day. I would look at the snow-covered mountains, at the fjords stretching to the horizon, and feel a deep connection to this place, to this land that was my home. It was a rustic home, yes, but it was a home full of life, love, and stories. And it was the only home I knew, and that I loved. My journey through the years taught me that true wealth lies not in gold or silver, but in the strength of family, the unity of community, and the ability to find beauty and purpose even in the greatest adversities. Life in Scandinavia, in 1150, was a living testament to that truth.